His hand was still on my hip. Not possessive. Not soft. Just there. Like he needed the contact to remember we were real. The sheets clung to my skin. My breath hadn't settled. Neither had his. He hadn't said a word since it ended, and I wasn't going to be the one to break the silence. Not yet. Because silence was how this started. And now, it was the only thing keeping us from falling apart again. If this moment left you breathless, tap like and subscribe. There's more where that came from, and some stories only unfold when you're watching. Rain didn't fall that morning, but I swore I could hear it, somewhere beneath the silence. Like my mother's voice behind the hospital walls, muffled, far away, and already fading. I watched the steam rise from my paper coffee cup as the black car waited outside, double-tinted, immaculate, unapologetically silent like him. My hands were steady. That surprised me. There should have been panic, or at least regret. But instead, all I could think was how strange it felt to be this calm, hours before marrying a man who didn't believe in love and didn't pretend to. The driver opened the door. He didn't speak. Of course he didn't. No one had, not really, since the agreement was signed. The silence around Vincent Hale was cultivated, like a weapon, like a religion, and I had chosen to walk straight into it. Not for love. Not for money. But for the girl who once crawled into my bed at night, terrified of the dark, and who now sat in a clinic room, tapping her fingers against her ears to block out a world that never learned how to speak her language. My sister, Ava, the only reason I'd survive the next 18 months. The building wasn't just tall, it was terrifying in its precision. Steel, glass, and gray, like the inside of a surgical instrument. I walked through the revolving doors of Hale Biomedical dressed in ivory. Not white. White was for hope. Ivory was for acceptance. I wore a silk-wrapped dress I'd sewn myself, no embellishments, no sleeves. The neckline dipped just enough to remind him I wasn't afraid. I wouldn't beg. Not yet. They didn't take me to a chapel. There was no aisle, no altar. Just a boardroom on the 46th floor, where the only guests were 2 lawyers, a notary, and 1 photographer whose camera never clicked. Vincent stood at the far end of the long glass table, dressed in black on black. His eyes didn't move to me. Not when I entered. Not even when I stood beside him. He didn't look at me. He looked through me, like a surgeon staring down at a patient already under anesthesia. "Sit," he said. His voice was the same as I remembered it. Cool, measured. Sharp enough to cut silk in the air. I sat. The notary began. Clause after clause, provision after provision. Healthcare for my sister, full-time residential support, unrestricted therapy access, covered in perpetuity under the Hale Foundation. In return, 18 months of image maintenance, public appearances, 1 relocation, no unauthorized interviews, no disclosure of past legal actions against Hale Biomedical or its affiliates, and a marriage. Legally binding, publicly framed as authentic, emotionally irrelevant. When the time came, he handed me a pen. I signed. So did he. "There will be no vows," Vincent said, as he pushed the final page toward the notary. "No ceremony. This is not a performance." I met his eyes, for the first time that morning. They were the color of winter steel and just as warm. But I didn't look away. He noticed, just barely. A flicker. It was the closest thing to hesitation I would ever get from him. Afterward, he walked me to the elevator. Still no kiss, no smile, no congratulations. "Your hotel suite has been arranged," he said, without a trace of emotion. "There's a folder on the table. It contains your cards, access credentials, contact protocol. Use what you need. Don't ask for more." The doors opened. He didn't follow. "Is that it?" I asked. That got his attention. He turned, just slightly, and looked at me like I'd broken a rule that wasn't written. But he didn't reprimand me, didn't correct me. He simply said, "What else did you expect?" I could have answered. I could have said a goodbye, or even a thank you for what he was doing for Ava. But I didn't. Instead, I stepped into the elevator, facing him fully until the doors closed. And I let the silence speak for me. The hotel suite was vast, cold, and furnished like a catalog. The kind of place you could scream in without anyone hearing. I didn't scream. I placed my dress on the back of a velvet chair and stood in front of the mirror, unpinning my hair, one piece at a time. My skin looked pale against the marble. I studied myself, not the way a bride might, but the way a soldier studies the edge of a blade. This wasn't a fairy tale. There were no rings, no flowers, no veil to lift, no man waiting in the next room with open arms. There was just me, and a contract, and a man who owned every breath I'd take from this moment on, at least on paper. I lay down in the center of the bed, arms folded, eyes wide open. Somewhere across the city, in a tower made of glass, Vincent Hale sat alone in his office, his tie loosened, his hands still. And for the first time in years, he pulled up a name he thought he'd buried. Isla Marin. His jaw twitched. Then he closed the file, poured himself a drink, and listened to the silence wrap around him like armor. The elevator doors slid open with a whisper. Everything about this building was too quiet, like a church designed by machines. The penthouse took up the entire top floor of the Hale Biomedical Residence Tower. The air smelled like cedar, ozone, and something colder than either. Money sterilized. Into space. There were no personal photos, no warm lighting, just glass, stone, steel. Surgical precision in the shape of a home. A woman greeted me. Late 50s, hair pulled into a severe bun, voice clipped. "Ms. Hale," she said, with clinical neutrality. "I'm Celia, household manager. Everything you need is programmed into the panel beside your bed. Your wardrobe is stocked per prior measurements. Dietary preferences have been accommodated. If you wish to request anything else, submit it. Through the app. All entries are monitored." Monitored. She didn't wait for a reply. Just walked away like I didn't exist. I stood there, holding nothing but a small duffel bag. The silence thickened around me like smoke. No welcoming note. No message from Vincent. No, "Let me know if you need anything." Just a city stretching. Out beneath the floor-to-ceiling windows, glittering like a sea of cold fire. The bedroom looked like something from a luxury catalog. King-size bed with crisp gray linens. Automated blackout curtains. A walk-in closet that smelled faintly of new fabric and policy. I opened a drawer and found a row of sleepwear. Silks, lace, all in cool neutrals. Not mine. Not anything I'd ever wear. They were beautiful. They were perfect. They were a uniform. The wardrobe wasn't for comfort. It was for control. I chose the simplest cotton shirt I had packed and walked barefoot to the balcony. Below, San Francisco pulsed with late-night traffic. I could see the edge of the bay. Somewhere in that city, my sister slept in a private care facility paid for by the man I had just married. I closed my eyes and inhaled the air. Freedom had a scent. This wasn't it. The days passed like chapters in a manual. Celia explained the schedule. A personal trainer twice a week, guided meals, media coaching, bi-weekly appearances when required. I was not to contact the press. I was not to speak about the past. I was not to speak at all unless cleared. There was no mention of Vincent. He didn't live in the penthouse. He had a separate residence above his office. He hadn't called, hadn't messaged, not once. At night, I wandered the apartment. It was so clean it felt uninhabited, but there were signs of him. in the subtlest ways. Books on neuroscience and corporate ethics. A framed certificate from a military field hospital in Kandahar. A custom whiskey decanter, unopened. In the library, there was a locked cabinet. I tried the handle once, just out of instinct. The red light flashed. Access denied. One night, around 2 a.m., I stood in front of the wall-sized mirror across from the bed. I studied my own reflection the way you'd study someone else's mugshot. Isla. Marin. Married. Monitored. Muzzled. No one had touched me since the wedding. Not a single hand on my skin. Not even in passing. It was like the contract had erased my body. I wasn't here to be held. I was here to be hidden. Still, the strangest thing was that I didn't feel fear. I felt tension. Waiting tension. Like standing on a frozen lake, knowing something below was moving. On the 6th day, the silence broke. It wasn't much. I was standing in the kitchen pouring tea when the elevator hummed behind me. I turned. Vincent stepped into the space like he'd been carved from shadow. Charcoal suit. No tie. Sleeves rolled. Eyes unreadable. He didn't speak at first. He just looked around, as if assessing damage. As if I were a patient whose vitals he needed to check. "Celia said you haven't submitted any requests," he said at last. His voice was softer than I remembered. Not warm. Just less surgical. "I didn't need anything," I replied. He tilted his head. "That's not how this works." "It's how I work," I said. Silence. Then he walked toward the kitchen island, poured himself water like he lived there, which he didn't. "I hope the accommodations are adequate," he said. "They're not accommodations," I answered. "They're instructions." That made him pause. He looked at me, really looked. "You're not afraid of me," he said. It wasn't a question. It was observation. A little unsettled, maybe. As if he was used to fear. As if he preferred it. "I should be," I said. "And yet," I shrugged. "Here we are." His jaw tightened. Not with anger, more like confusion. Like I was a line of code that wouldn't run. "Tell me something, Isla," he said after a moment. "Why didn't you ask about visitation with your sister?" I didn't answer right away. "I already know you'll let me see her," I said. "You need me cooperative, not collapsed." He blinked once. Slowly, and then he did something I wasn't prepared for. He smiled. Not soft, not genuine, but brief. "And real. Smart," he said. He turned to leave, but paused at the elevator. "You'll receive your appearance schedule by morning," he added. "If you're going to be a ghost, Isla, at least learn how to haunt properly." Then he was gone. That night, I didn't sleep. Not because I was afraid, but because I realized something else. He thought he understood silence. He thought it made him powerful. But silence wasn't his weapon. It was mine, and I was about to use it to ruin him beautifully. It started with a door that wasn't locked. A week into the arrangement, I had learned the boundaries of my prison. What could be touched? What was monitored? What would trigger red lights? The library was one of the few spaces I was allowed to enter freely. The cabinet in the corner, though, that had always been off limits. A biometric lock. Red light. Untouchable. Until that night, I'd gone in for a book. Something, anything, to quiet the thoughts unraveling behind my eyes. But when I passed the cabinet, the light blinked green. No sound. Just a soft shift from denial to invitation. Curiosity didn't just stir. It lunged. I hesitated for exactly one breath. Then I opened it. Inside was a file box. Simple. Ordinary. Except it was filled with paper records, handwritten notes, not digital printouts. Each labeled in Vincent's precise block lettering, patient data, surgical evaluations. trauma case reports, and one folder marked Maureen E. DeCiccetti froze. The air went still around me, as if the walls had sucked in their breath. My mother's name, my mother's death. This wasn't a copy of the public report. This was an internal, Hale biomedical incident evaluation, dated 2 weeks before the hospital publicly cleared itself of wrongdoing. My heart thudded. There were annotations. Red ink. Circled directives. One margin note stood out. Patient not stabilized before sedative administered. Risk flagged. Proceeded anyway. Outcome fatal. I didn't know how long I stared at it. My fingers clenched around the folder. Knuckles. White. I felt the weight of the moment. Not just grief, not just rage, but the sheer, icy confirmation of something I had always suspected. They knew. He knew. And they buried her anyway. I didn't hear the elevator, didn't sense the footsteps. Only when the air behind me shifted did I realize I wasn't alone. Put it back. His voice was low, controlled. No anger, just gravity. I turned slowly. Vincent stood in the doorway, suit jacket off, sleeves rolled, eyes unreadable. I didn't break anything, I said. You opened something that wasn't meant for you. Then maybe, I said, holding the folder like a weapon. You shouldn't have left it unlocked. A long silence. He stepped inside, slowly, like approaching. A bomb. I gave you freedom inside a very clear framework, Isla, and you chose to break it. No, I said. I chose to see. He stopped a few feet away. You don't get to rewrite the past based on a folder taken out of context. I almost laughed. You think that's all this is? Context? A woman died because your hospital rushed a procedure to clear a bed. That woman was my mother. I know who she was. Do you? I asked, stepping closer, because I don't think you remember her as anything but a statistic, a liability, a name you could sign off and forget. Something flickered in his jaw, but his voice stayed even. You think I forgot? He moved past me to the cabinet and slid the folder from my hands with calm precision. I remember every mistake that's ever passed through this building, including her, especially her. Then why hide this? I demanded. I didn't hide it, he said. I compartmentalized. There's a difference. Not to me. We stood there in that library of glass and shadow. Nothing between us now but truth, and the unbearable awareness of what I had done. I had cracked him. Not completely. Not yet. But something had shifted. The control, the detachment. It had slipped for just a second, and that second was mine. He didn't yell. He didn't touch me. He simply returned the folder to the cabinet, closed it, and turned to me. You're here because I chose to give your sister what she needed, not because I owe you penance. I didn't ask for penance. Then what do you want? That was the first time he'd asked me anything that wasn't a directive. I held his gaze, breathing steady. I want you to feel what she felt. Not pain, not fear, powerlessness. I want you to know what it's like to lose something you thought you could control. He took a slow breath, as if trying to measure how much damage had been done. Then, voice low, be careful, Isla. I stepped forward, inches from him now. Are you threatening me? No, he said, but I'm starting to understand you. I didn't answer, because that was the point, wasn't it? I didn't have to. Later that night, I stood in front of the mirror again. Same face, same eyes, same woman. But something in me had reawakened. Grief had always lived inside me. But now, I had direction. This wasn't just about surviving a contract anymore. This was about dismantling the illusion of control he wore like a second skin. And the most powerful part? He didn't know when I'd strike next. Only that I would. I'd learned how to navigate his world, and now I was going to haunt it from the inside. The invitation arrived as a notification. Hail Foundation. Gala formal attire required. Spousal presence mandatory. Transport scheduled. Departure at 7 p.m. I stared at the screen like it was a summons, not a request. And in his world, that's exactly what it was. No one told me what to wear. They didn't need to. The dress was midnight blue, floor-length silk, chosen not for glamour, but for precision. High neckline, bare shoulders, backless, powerfully, understated. I pinned my hair up, left my lips bare, and added no jewelry. The effect was calculated, untouchable, composed. A woman who didn't need permission to be seen. Vincent met me in the lobby. He looked like he always did. Sharp edges, black suit, cufflinks that could probably buy a small country. But something in his eyes flickered the moment he saw me. Not desire, not approval. Tension. "You're late," he said quietly. I wasn't. We both knew it. I wanted to be memorable. He offered his arm. I didn't take it. But when we stepped into the car, our knees brushed. He didn't move his away. The gala was held in a glass ballroom that hovered above the city like a snow globe. Soft jazz floated through the air. Champagne glinted like gold in every hand. The richest people in California clinked glasses and traded. Polite lies. We walked in like we belonged. Two perfect silhouettes, manufactured elegance. People looked at him with reverence. They looked at me with curiosity. They didn't see the leash between us, but I felt it pull with every step. Vincent spoke in measured tones, said what needed to be said, made his appearances, shook hands. But every time he reached for me, it wasn't affection, it was strategy. A hand on my lower back as we passed through crowds. A brush of his fingers over mine when a camera turned our way. It was possession disguised as intimacy, and I let him do it. Because that was the game. Let them think you've surrendered, until you know exactly where to strike. An hour in, I slipped, away. Just long enough to breathe. The balcony overlooked the bay. The city lights shimmered like broken stars. I leaned on the rail, thinking about Ava, about my mother, about all the things this life had stolen and repackaged into politeness. I heard him before I saw him. I told you to stay within view. I turned slowly. Vincent stood in the doorway, jaw tight, not angry, agitated. "Why?" I asked. "Afraid someone might think your wife has a mind of her own? You're not here to test boundaries." "No," I said. "I'm here to reflect your image. Isn't that what you said?" His eyes scanned my face like a diagnosis. "Someone spoke to you," he said. I didn't answer. Because it was true. A man, one of the Foundation's medical partners, had approached me earlier. He'd smiled, leaned too close, and asked if I was the activist bride. Apparently, whispers of my past attempts to sue Hale Biomedical hadn't fully died. I hadn't denied it. I hadn't confirmed it. I'd just smiled and walked away. But Vincent had noticed. Of course he had. He noticed everything. He stepped closer now, barely an inch between us. "You don't get to play games with my reputation." "I don't need to," I said. "Your silence speaks for you." His hands twitched once at his sides. He was unraveling, and he didn't know how to hide it. "Don't push me, Isla." I raised my chin. "You chose me to be a symbol. You don't get to complain. When I become a mirror instead." His jaw locked. He looked at me like he wanted to shake me, or kiss me, or both. Then quietly, "You said nothing. And yet you screamed, you belong to me." The silence hit like thunder. We weren't touching. But I could feel every cell in my body tilt toward him. "I don't belong to anyone," I said. His voice lowered, darker now. "No? Then why is it that every time you walk away, I lose track of myself?" I didn't move. Neither did he. For a long second, the entire party might as well have disappeared. Then he reached out, slowly, and touched the side of my throat. Just his fingertips. It was barely contact, but it seared. "You should be careful," he said softly. "Why?" "Because I'm starting to forget this was supposed to be a contract." The word stayed with me for the rest of the night. We returned to the penthouse in silence. No debrief, no anger. But something had cracked open. He had touched me, finally, and not in control, but in need. And he hated it. Later, I found myself back in the library. The folder was still locked away. But I didn't need it tonight, because now, he was the one carrying the weight. For the first time, Vincent Hale looked at me and didn't see a liability. He saw a threat, a mystery, a woman who refused to flinch, and I saw a man unraveling. The rain started just after midnight. Not a drizzle, a storm, full-bodied and furious, pounding the glass walls of the penthouse like fists. The wind howled through the steel beams like a warning. I didn't sleep. I'd tried. Laid in bed, eyes on the ceiling, listening to the thunder shake the world around me. But the storm inside was louder, hotter, and much, much closer. Vincent hadn't spoken to me since the gala. He hadn't touched me either, not since the balcony. But I felt him in every breath, every corner of the room, like heat pressing against the skin, waiting to ignite. I got up, barefoot. The silk robe clung to my body like breathless fabric, thin and untrustworthy. I walked to the kitchen. Just for tea, I told myself, but I never made it there because the elevator chimed. I froze. No one came up here without being buzzed in, and only one man had access that didn't require permission. He stepped into the dimly lit hallway like a shadow uncoiling. Vincent. Rain on his shoulders. No umbrella. Shirt soaked through beneath the trench coat he'd only halfway bothered to button. He said nothing. Just looked at me, top to toe, and something in him cracked. He walked toward me like he didn't trust himself to stop. "Couldn't sleep?" I asked softly, unsure why my voice felt so dry. He stopped a foot away. "You ran from me," he said. It wasn't an accusation. It wasn't even anger. It was hunger, starved and disguised as control. "I left a party," I replied. "You left me," he said. "In front of them." I stared at him, at the hair dripping at his temples, the shirt plastered to his chest, the storm behind his eyes. "And you didn't follow," I whispered. He took one step closer. Close enough that the heat from his body overran the space between us. I couldn't. I swallowed. "Why?" "Because if I had, Isla." His voice broke, just slightly. I wouldn't have stopped. Then he did something he hadn't done since the day we met. He reached for me. Not a command. Not a performance. A need. His hand came to my face, fingers tracing the edge of my jaw, barely touching, like I might vanish. I didn't move. Then, slowly, I lifted my own hand, placed it over his, and pressed it closer. The air broke like glass. His mouth was on mine in a flash, hot, desperate, unpracticed. No choreography, no camera-ready staging, just want. Raw and real. He tasted like rain and restraint, and underneath that, regret. He pressed me back against the wall, hands sliding to my waist, then gripping tight, like he needed an anchor. Like I was the only thing keeping him from sinking. I gasped against his mouth. He caught it, swallowed it. No words, no apologies, only breath and friction. He tore the robe open, no hesitation, no gentleness, but not cruelly. Like a man starving at the altar of his own resistance. His hands were everywhere, sliding over my ribs, gripping my hips, pulling me into him until I could feel every inch of him, hard and demanding beneath soaked fabric. He kissed me like he'd never get another chance. And I kissed him back like I didn't want one. He lifted me, one motion, and carried me to the dining table, sweeping his coat across it before laying me down. His mouth found my collarbone, my neck, lower. My legs wrapped around him instinctively. There was nothing gentle about it. It was rough, desperate, a surrender disguised as a war, and I gave in. Not because I was his, but because I chose it. Because silence doesn't mean submission. Sometimes silence means, don't stop. More. Now. When he entered me, it wasn't careful. It was real. Fast. Almost punishing. And I wanted it that way. Because there was no room left for restraint. Not after weeks of being looked at, handled, avoided, studied. Now, he saw me. And I wanted him to feel every second he hadn't. He grunted, against my skin, rhythm brutal, steady, desperate. My nails dragged down his back. He hissed, but didn't slow. Our bodies slapped against each other, fast and reckless. When I came, it wasn't a wave. It was a crash. Silent, violent, blinding. He followed with a curse, one hand clenched in my hair, the other gripping the table, like he might break it. We didn't speak for minutes, just breathing. He slumped beside me, still half-clothed, his chest rising and falling like a man just pulled from drowning. I turned my head. His eyes were closed, his jaw soft for once, and I realized he hadn't just taken. He'd given me something too. His control, his silence, his edge. All of it, shattered between our bodies on that table. When he finally opened his eyes, he didn't speak. He just looked at me. Not cold, not curious. Wrecked. Then, barely audible, don't want to own you anymore. I want to be yours. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. My silence said everything. I didn't sleep that night. Vincent had left after. No words. No parting glance. Just silence. Not the charged kind we used to exchange in boardrooms or balconies. This one was softer, more dangerous. Like aftershocks. I stayed on the table long after he disappeared, letting the air settle on my skin, letting my body remember what it felt like to be claimed by someone who hadn't meant to lose control. He had given me something real, but that wasn't enough, because there was still a part of him I hadn't touched, and I had to know what it was. The next morning, the city was drowned in gray light and fog. Celia didn't greet me. No trainer, no assistant, no call from Vincent. Just a note on the kitchen tablet. Out of office. Confidential briefing. Do not disturb. Good. Because I was done waiting. The biometric lock on the cabinet no longer blinked red. This time, it turned green the moment I touched it. He'd left it open. Whether it was carelessness or invitation, I didn't know. But I took it. The folder was still there. Marin E. Deciseri sat on the floor and read every line. I'd seen the summary before. But now I took in the full report. Clinical memos, internal emails, directives from the legal department, and one document, buried near the back, sealed in a separate envelope. Authorizing immediate withdrawal of the investigation into procedural misconduct, signed .v. Hale. The room tilted, not because it was a shock, but because I had hoped, stupidly, selfishly, that he hadn't known, that maybe he had come in after the fact, that he had inherited the mess. But no, he had been the one to end the inquiry, to silence the voices asking what went wrong, to bury my mother twice. I didn't cry, but I didn't breathe for a long time. I sat there, folder in my lap, heart thudding like something trying to claw its way out. And I waited, not for logic, not for justice, for him. He came home late that night, still damp from rain, like the sky hadn't stopped since we'd collided. He walked in without his usual tension. Jacket slung casually, hair tousled, his expression almost soft. Then he saw me, standing in the library, folder in hand. The softness drained. "You left it unlocked," I said. His jaw clenched. "I know." "You wanted me to see it?" He didn't answer. "Say it," I whispered. "You signed the order." I did. The silence after that was deafening. He stepped forward. I stepped back. "You ended the review. You shut it down. You let them lie." He didn't argue. "Why?" My voice cracked. "Why my mother?" "She wasn't your mother to me," he said. There it was, a single sentence that changed everything. "She was just another name," he continued, "another risk to manage. I didn't know who she was then. I didn't know you." "But you knew she mattered to someone," I said. "You knew someone would break because of that signature. And I signed it anyway." He wasn't denying it. He wasn't begging. He was owning it. And that, somehow, was worse. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. "All this time you watched me suffer. You watched me fight and collapse and give up, and you said nothing." "I thought I was protecting you," he said. "And myself." "From what?" "From what we are now." His voice dropped, raw. "Because the moment I knew who she was, I knew I couldn't look at you without seeing what I'd done." He moved closer. "I thought the contract would protect us both. That distance would dilute the damage. But you never stayed distant. You never let me forget." "I didn't try to," I said. "I didn't know. I did." I stepped back, folder pressed against my chest like a shield. "Everything we've done, everything I gave up, was built on a lie." "No," he said. "It was built on guilt. But it became more than that." I shook my head. "You don't get to rewrite it now. You don't get to hand me truth like a gift and expect forgiveness as change." His eyes darkened. "I'm not asking for forgiveness." "Then what are you asking for?" He looked at me with that hollow stillness I had once mistaken for strength. "I'm asking you to stay. Not because I deserve it, but because I'll never stop trying to." I didn't move. He reached for me. Slow, like I was glass. But I flinched. That stopped him. And then I said the one thing I hadn't said in weeks. "I can't do this. Not like this." He swallowed. "Isla, I need to go." "Where?" "Somewhere that doesn't feel like silence. Somewhere I can hear myself think." Didn't pack much, just a bag, a coat, the folder. He didn't stop me. He didn't chase. He just stood in the doorway watching me go, with eyes that finally looked human. In the elevator, I stared at my reflection. Not a wife, not a pawn, not a victim. A woman with the truth. A woman who had finally broken the silence. 3 weeks. That's how long I was gone. Long enough for my silence to echo louder than any headline. Long enough for Vincent Hale to destroy the empire he built with his own 2 hands. I didn't ask him to, but he did it anyway. The first story broke quietly, an anonymous leak to a medical watchdog site. Reopened files, suppressed documents, internal, memos from the night my mother died. Then the second hit louder. Vincent Hale, CEO of Hale Biomedical, had resigned effective immediately, citing ethical conflict. No statement, no press conference, just one line in black and white. I know. Longer trust my silence to be harmless. The board scrambled, stocks dipped, investors panicked. But it didn't stop there. He testified, publicly, under oath. Not just about my mother, but every questionable incident buried under procedure and protocol. He named names, he burned bridges, and he didn't flinch. I watched. All of it unfold from a quiet town in Oregon, where Ava and I had found temporary refuge in a rented cottage near the water. No security system, no penthouse view, just wind and trees. She was doing better, more engaged, less anxious. Maybe because, for once, I was still. But my hands still trembled when I watched the hearings. Not from fear, from awe, from anger, from heartbreak. He wasn't the man I had married anymore. That man had used silence as a weapon. This one used truth like a blade, and he bled with every word. Celia called me the day after the final hearing. He didn't want me to reach out. She said, "But I'm not doing this for him." I didn't speak. "He's gone," she added. "Not dead, just gone." "Where?" "Sold his properties, moved out of the city. No press, no staff, no title." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because he left something for you. But he said only to give it if you asked." "I'm not asking," I said. Pause. Then Celia whispered, like she didn't want even the walls to hear. "He told me you taught him how to beg without words. Now he's learning how to love without expectations." And just like that, the line went dead. I didn't call back. Not right away. Because love, when it's real, should leave space. So I gave him mine. Until one morning. A week later, a letter arrived at the cottage. No return address. No signature. Just one sentence, handwritten in clean, deliberate strokes. "The house is yours if you want it. So am I. No contracts, no silence, just choice." And an address. A cabin. It took me 2 more days to go. Not because I doubted him, because I doubted myself. Could I forgive someone who had once held my grief in a drawer? Could I trust a man who broke everything only after I left? But in the end, I went. Because healing isn't always about forgetting. Sometimes it's about choosing what comes after, the truth. The cabin sat at the edge of a lake, surrounded by pine and fog. I saw him before he saw me. Vincent was chopping wood out back. Flannel shirt, sleeves rolled. No security detail, no luxury watch. Just a man who had been stripped down to the bone, and survived it. He looked up. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then he set the axe down and walked toward me like someone afraid of a hallucination. He didn't touch me, didn't speak, just stood there, breathing hard. I held up the letter. "This address, I hoped," he said softly. "I didn't come to forgive you," I said. "I know. I didn't come for closure either. I know." I stepped closer, looked him dead in the eyes. "I came because you did the one thing no man ever has." He waited. "You let me walk away. And then you rebuilt something I might want to return to." He closed his eyes, and when he opened them, they weren't made of steel anymore. They were just human. "I'm still not good," he said, "but I'm trying." I reached out and took his hand. It was rough, warm, real. That's all I ever wanted. Inside, the cabin was small, no glass walls, no boardroom silence, just books, a fireplace, a single bed, unmade. He poured coffee. I made eggs. We didn't talk about courtrooms or headlines. We talked about how he'd planted herbs out back, how Ava might like the lake, how he wakes up terrified some mornings, thinking she still hates him. "I don't," I said. He looked at me. "Not anymore." That night we didn't have sex. We didn't need to. He held me like he was afraid I might dissolve, and for the first time since I met him, he asked me a question. Not about my obligations, not about my schedule. "Are you happy?" I didn't answer. I just kissed him. Because this wasn't about promises or punishment. It was about peace, the kind you build after the war ends. Morning in the cabin was a slow, golden thing. No alarms, no meetings, just the faint hum of wind through pine trees and the warmth of a body beside mine. Not hovering, not performing, just there. Vincent lay on his back, one arm across his chest, the other resting loosely between us. His face was softer, in sleep. The kind of softness you don't notice in a man until after he's shattered and survived it. I watched his chest rise and fall, counted the breaths, not because I was afraid they'd stop, but because I finally trusted them to keep going. I got up quietly and pulled on a shirt from the floor, his, oversized and familiar. In the kitchen, I brewed coffee and listened to the cabin settle, floorboards creaking in the way old wood always does when no one's walking. There was a peace here that didn't exist in glass towers or guarded elevators. It came in the form of things left unsaid, fights not picked, truths accepted instead of controlled. It was new, and terrifying, and real. He found me standing on the back porch, mug in hand, eyes on the lake. He stepped behind me without touching. "I thought you'd left," he said quietly. "Not this time." His hand brushed my lower back. Just once. But it stayed there. A tether. "You're allowed to," he added. "If it's ever too quiet here." "It's not the quiet I'm afraid of," I said. "What is it then?" "Being silenced." He nodded. He understood. Because he used to be the one doing it. We sat on the porch steps. The sun came up slow. He didn't rush to fill the silence, and I didn't feel the need to break it. Eventually he turned to me. "I still think about it," he said. "That folder, your mother, the court. I know. I still don't expect forgiveness. I'm not here to offer it like some prize." His eyes locked onto mine. "Then what are you offering?" I let the moment breathe. And then, presence, honesty, a future that doesn't pretend the past never happened. He reached over, took my coffee, sipped it without asking. I rolled my eyes and leaned into him. The silence between us now wasn't control. It was communion. Later that day, we sat at the kitchen table, sorting through mail. A letter came from the foundation. They wanted to rename a new research wing in my mother's honor, the Eliza Marin Center for Patient Advocacy, funded anonymously. But I knew. Vincent didn't look at me when I opened it. I didn't say thank you, because he hadn't done it for gratitude. He'd done it because some debts aren't meant to be repaid, only honored. That night, we lay tangled in bed sheets, the window cracked open to let in the lake breeze. I rested my head on his chest, and for once, it wasn't a question. It was an answer. His fingers traced circles across my back. Not in search of anything, just to remind himself I was there. "Are you happy?" he asked again. I thought about it, about Ava laughing at the lake that morning, about the rhythm we were finding, the kind that didn't rely on dominance or control or silence laced with threat, about the way he looked at me now, like a man who had lost everything, but finally kept the one thing that mattered. I looked up, at him. "I'm not afraid anymore," I said, "and that might be better than happy." He kissed me slowly, deeply, like the kind of kiss that doesn't lead to more, because it already is more. "I never thought I could be this," he said, "with you, without the armor." "You still wear pieces of it," I whispered. "Only when I forget I'm not at war." "You're not. Not unless you leave again." I pulled him down beside me, lips brushing his jaw. "Then remember this. I'm not yours because you fixed it. I'm yours because you let it break." We made love slowly that night. No firestorm. No crashing thunder, just breath and skin. And years of tension dissolved into something weightless. He didn't command, didn't withhold. We moved like people who had learned how to ask without words, how to beg without shame, and how to answer without fear. Sometime after midnight, I turned toward him in the dark. "Vincent?" If I stay, you don't have to finish that sentence, he said. I want to. He waited. If I stay, it's not for safety, or comfort, or guilt. I know. It's because you're not a prison anymore. He pulled me into his chest, forehead to mine. I'll never be again. His voice was barely a whisper when he said it. Mine forever. And for the first time, I whispered back, now and truly free. If this story moved you, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more powerful journeys just like this one. Every click helps bring more untold voices to life.